My name is Chris Garrity. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a co-coordinator of the For Us on Amazon Coalition. Um, I am based in DC in Ward 6 on the unceded ancestral lands of the Piscataway people, the Pamunkey people, the Nacotchtank people, and the Doug Tuxenon people. Um, and so with us now, we have Cristina Rosales, who is, pull up her bio here. Cristina works with affiliates to build and grow housing and land justice campaigns and strategies that advance housing as a human right and promote public land for good. Cristina was deputy director of Texas Housers, a statewide housing justice advocacy group that supports community leaders to become effective housing advocates and hold public officials accountable to invest in community-centered solutions. She supervised teams of staff focused on pandemic recovery, legislative advocacy for tenant protections, San Antonio tenant rights, equitable development, and communications and messaging. Cristina is co-director of Dots Home, a narrative video game that follows a young Black woman in Detroit living in her grandmother's beloved home as she travels through time to relive key moments in her family's history where race, place, and home collide in difficult choices. She is also on the board of the Austin Tenants Council. So welcome, Cristina. I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much for joining us.
So some of the things that I will chat with you about are pretty wonky, but I do appreciate some of the discussion that happened right before this session, which was about narrative and who owns the narrative and how exactly it's being manipulated by a massively powerful company. And I'm going to kind of go into, I know all weekend y'all are talking about power and the ways that that power has just distorted so many parts of our democracy, our culture, our cities, our working conditions, our labor, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to talk about this.
I didn't expect you to be behind me.
I'm going to talk about this from the housing perspective. So I'm not sure entirely how aware folks are of some of the research that has come out about Amazon and its effect on housing. So people call it the Amazon effect in its, Amazon's ability to change markets, change cities, change real estate, change housing conditions. I'm calling it the Amazon distortion because it's not just an effect. Like, going back to narrative discussion, like this is not normal. This is a distortion. So I want to steer us away from calling it the Amazon effect and call it the Amazon distortion. So yeah, how the behemoth has wreaked havoc on housing markets. So the Amazon discussion in Northern Virginia is, it's not new, but it's new in comparison to where the company started. So just some background, Amazon just started it, just before the mid-90s in Seattle. And it grew and grew. It was, obviously, you all know, it's like this online bookstore. And one of the times that sociologists believe that it had where things just skyrocketed and everything changed was in 2010. Amazon moved from it was like in a clinic that had been empty, vacant for a long time. It was like I think it was Beacon Hill Clinic. And so it moved its headquarters in 2010 to South Lake Union, which is a neighborhood in Seattle. The area was mostly industrial. It was kind of like warehouses, parking lots, but the neighborhood, the residential part of the neighborhood was like 60% Black and brown, but mostly Black. And so they claim, they tore down, they razed a lot of the neighborhood. And so I want to be clear that at that time, they did not own any of that land. They were leasing it. They were leasing their previous spot at the old clinic. Then they moved into South Lake Union buildings. So those buildings or that space was this massive space that the owner of that Vulcan, the company is called Vulcan, and it is owned by someone, what is his name? Oh God, I'm sorry, I'm gonna forget his name, but the owner of Vulcan was the co-founder of Microsoft with his high school buddy, Bill Gates. They founded, or he founded this company. And in essence, they took that South Lake Union property and said, who are we going to build this for? We're going to build this massive complex, and it's going to be for Amazon. There was no question about it. It was like clearly for Amazon. And then Amazon was, wealthy enough, Jeff Bezos was wealthy enough to buy that location, which was always like the intent. So to be clear, like the Amazon as like a real estate giant, like that's always been the case because of Jeff Bezos' wealth and the partnership with Vulcan, aka the co-founder of Microsoft. I'm going to skip some of this timeline here because I want to spend some time digging into the distortion that happened. So this was several years before Amazon moved to South Lake Union. But you could see that all of these occupants are like related to tech. So the purple is just like other. There wasn't really an Amazon to move in yet. There wasn't Google there, Facebook. Like this was just tech companies, because I want you to remember, like Seattle has always been kind of a tech town, an entrepreneurial town, just not as much as it is now. So that was tech. So then in 2018, I want you to look at all of this development. So this is 12 years later. So Amazon, this is the South Lake Union again. So this Amazon is all of the red. And then Facebook is blue. There's still other tech companies. And then there's Google. But they completely changed the nature of this neighborhood. And they raised so much of the Black owned businesses, that people couldn't afford to stay there anymore. And so how much space did Amazon take up? So it takes 43 companies to match Amazon's 8.1 million square feet of office space in Seattle. We're not going to do the interactive piece of this, but Amazon is massive. And the reason I'm spending a lot of time talking about like land and space is because I want to think more about, I want us to think about the space that this company takes up and distorts our cities. And how does it do that, right? You talked about, I think earlier you talked about like, they take over space, they take over government. So their employees, like the higher ups, they become members of the chambers of commerce. They become, friends of, the mayor and the city council members, and they pull strings and strike deals that gives them an upper hand in making these decisions. So, it's really like Amazon or Seattle became a company town. So going back to the timeline, so after 2012, I wonder if I can, let's see. So 2012 happens, they buy South Lake Union, they develop the crap out of it. Within 5 years, rents skyrocketed over 60%, and evictions spiked. Most of those evictions were Black and brown people in Seattle. The price of a home in Seattle went up about 60%. And there've been like tons of sociology studies and economic and policy studies that have shown us that it's not just, the market is changing or whatever. This is like absolutely connected. No, there's no doubt about it. Even conservative policy analysts or whatever, they are positive that Amazon's outsized presence and control over democracy and over cities has fueled homelessness, and a host of other problems like, traffic congestion, housing prices, and that kind of thing. So, how is this, like, how is Seattle relevant? Like, Seattle is not Northern Virginia. Seattle's not like Nashville. Seattle's whatever. It's different, but it's not like, I think what happened in Seattle, like Northern Virginia, and lots of other cities that are feeling that presence of Amazon, they're not where Seattle is right now. There's still time. There's still time to like prevent this and to think about, how can we intervene? So when Amazon launched its HQ2 search, creating this race to the bottom with tax subsidies and all of this ridiculous dog and pony show sorts of things, there was some possibility of Amazon coming to another city. Let's like go back to early 2018, late 2017, Detroit, Dallas, like Austin, and like all these cities were vying for HQ2. And there was promise, like, we're going to bring good paying jobs, we're going to invest in the community, things are going to be different, things are going to be for the better. And I think that's like it makes sense for people to have made that argument, especially in places like that have experienced a lack of investment and neglect, white flight, like those cities. It makes sense that they were seriously courting Amazon. So a few points on this that I want us to be prepared with, because people are going to say this all day long. They're going to say, like, we want economic development, we want all of this. There's a few points on that. So that kind of thing, let's jolt the economy, let's revitalize this city. That kind of thing only works well if it's happening in a city that has experienced a decline in population, like talking about like tons of vacant houses and buildings that there's no, attraction. So, that's a lot of the like industrial Midwest, for example. But the city pays a very high price for that kind of revitalization. The city pays a high cultural price. In essence, they're asking somebody to come in and change politics, culture, ownership, like all of that. They're asking those companies to come in and change things. And they risk becoming a company town. So when you think about Seattle was already home to the University of Washington, for example. They were home to Boeing, which is they're a huge like innovator. They actually have a lot to do with, like defense and all sorts of things like technology. They were home to Boeing. They were home to Microsoft, which that was in Redmond, which is a suburb. But so all of these little things happening, like Seattle was already home to lots of like tech companies that were just starting, or they were already like run by a few big companies. So if that's not going to happen in somewhere like, Cleveland or Cincinnati or, wherever, like companies like Amazon are attracted to where there are already, like there's already inequality brewing because those are the areas where like people are moving. Those are the areas where folks have there's lots of opportunities. So yeah, and then and most even conservative policy people, progressives, absolutely, they warn that this like Amazon distortion will make housing conditions worse, clog traffic, and will heighten inequality when Amazon comes to a city that's already kind of happening, for example, Northern Virginia or the DC metro area, home to like lots of lobbyists and policymakers and schools and defense industry and tech and, name it, like Northern Virginia has it, like the DMV area has all of that. And so of course, Amazon chose this area for HQ2. There was never any real competition, like, let's face it. So yeah, I think that it's important to understand what happened in Seattle, for what we have to prepare ourselves for the fight against HQ2 and like the outsized influence. The other thing I wanted to say is that one very clear example that has been covered a lot by the media is Amazon, when Amazon in 2019 or I think it was late 2018, the city of Seattle unanimously passed a tax on Amazon, or big companies, really, just big companies in the area, called a head tax. It was like a $275 per employee tax. It would have paid for homeless services. It would have paid for various things to solve some of the housing crisis, and address some of the most like dire needs, because homelessness just absolutely was out of control around this time. I mean, it still is, but the city council, which is mostly progressive, unanimously passed this tax, which Amazon lobbied against, along with Microsoft. And Amazon alone spent $1 million trying to kill this tax after it was unanimously passed. And then they also worked to unseat various city council members following this decision. Amazon won, and the city council repealed the head tax. Subsequently, Amazon decided to use, a significant portion of their money, it was like $200 million or something, to pay for a homeless shelter and to pay nonprofits. Again, like, it sounds nice, but it is so problematic that nonprofits then, in addition to the politics, like Amazon paying politicians, essentially, in addition to Amazon, becoming an influencer within the city, to, the city's civic infrastructure, Amazon then pays nonprofits who are trying to solve these problems. Amazon pays these nonprofits off too, so that criticism is like curbed. So yeah, I mean, it's really gross. It's really horrible. And that's where we are, right? I'm sure that the groups here in Northern Virginia have already seen, all of this stuff taking place. So let's spend a little. So yeah, this is the South Lake Union area. It's really sad to see some of this. I wish I had taken before pictures, but that's what it looks like now. It did not look like that. None of these buildings here were there. These towers, obviously this Amazon, biosphere, whatever it's called, it was not here. This was really just like barbershops. There was like an air base here, so there was a lot of barbershops like popping up and taking care of like the clientele in this area. Most of them were Black owned. And this is just what happened with the head tax. There was just like debate after debate, and Seattleites skew progressive, minus some of the tech bros, but even then, most of like the tech people, they skew progressive. So in essence, like, it was simply money. It wasn't like public outrage. It was simply money that succeeded in flipping this thing in Seattle, the head tax. Okay, so now I'm going to get a little wonky here and tell you what's happening in Arlington / Northern Virginia. And this data is for the metro area, so it's Alexandria, Arlington, and DC. So the average rent in the DC area for a 2-bedroom is $1,765 a month. In order for this to be considered affordable, so you're not cost burdened, you need an income, a household income of $70,600. This is pretty out of line with what the normal median renter income. So this is broken down. This is broken down by like just renters. So average in this area in Arlington, median renter income is just under $60,000. So there's that $10,000 gap. And then just so you know, the Amazon starting wage is $15 an hour. By 2045, the number of households with incomes below 80% of the area median income. So 80% of the area median income is just around 70,000 for a family of four. So less than, oops, sorry. Yeah, so 44,000, there will be a need for 44,000 units that are affordable to folks at 80% of the area median income. The city knows this, like the area knows this. There are goals. So, you know, just like any city responsible for making things work, Arlington, Virginia has a master plan to increase the percentage of rental units below 60% of the area median income. And so that's like 17.7. And right now there's less than like 10%. And the county would need to produce 731 committed affordable units per year to achieve this goal. They're nowhere near meeting that goal, like at all. And so, you know, clearly Amazon is going to make things worse. So yeah, so DC, Arlington, Alexandria, there's a deficit of apartments affordable to people at or below 50% of the area median income. It's nearly 150,000 apartment units that the area is lacking. And so per 100 households who are considered like extremely low income, for every 100 of those folks, of those households, there are only 32 affordable and available apartments. Yeah, let that sink in. Like there are 100 people looking for apartments and less than about a third of them will be able to find something that's suitable for them. And you know, the same thing for people who are just slightly above that extremely low income. It's called, you know, officially by HUD guidelines, it's 50% of the area median income. So there are 52 apartments available and affordable to them. And then I want to emphasize that, you know, at 80%, which is around, I think it's like around $70,000 of an annual income, there's like almost sufficient apartments. There's 99. Obviously, there could be more. There always should be more housing, enough housing, abundant housing for everyone. But yeah, there's 99. So, you know, one person might be stretched thin, or one household might be stretched thin. And at 100% of the area median income, there are 105. So there's a slight surplus. You know, so these are median list prices for single family homes in Arlington, Alexandria, DC area. So in November 2018 was when Amazon made their HQ2 announcement. So just right before that, houses were listed at 700, median list price was 780,000. And just a couple of years ago, less than a couple of years ago, like look at how much it shot up. Like just between the announcement, just a month after the announcement, prices shot up 50%. And yeah, and it's like no joke, it's continuing. Yeah, it's really wild. Oh, there we go. So now I'm going to spend some time. First of all, let me pause here, and I want to see if there are like any questions or comments, because now I'm going to get into like the really wonky stuff. So I want to make sure there's a chance to ask some of those clarifying questions about this data. I'm also happy to make it a little bit more understandable if we need to. So I'm going to talk about something a little bit even wonkier than housing conditions. So in 2021, on January 6th, Amazon announced, January 6th, that horrible day, y'all. This was buried, I guess, because of that news day. But anyway, in 2021, on January 6th, Amazon announced a $2 billion equity fund and $125 million in grants, and they called it the Housing Equity Fund. I want to be very clear about the name of this fund. I think most people in like progressive spaces, or even just like normal people aware of like what's happening in the mainstream, would see the name Amazon Housing Equity Fund and they would say, oh, this is like Amazon's attempt to achieve some housing justice, some semblance of housing justice. This is not what it is. Like, these are bank loans. And when you think about loans, think about interest rates. And Amazon, in essence, like profits from this fund. They make it sound magnanimous. They say like, oh, developers of color especially are our target. We want to make sure people have the equity, the housing equity that is the like capital to build housing that is so badly needed in this area. So it's like their effort at it's PR. I will just say that it's PR. It's them having it's them trying to find a way to get ahead of the bad press, and like not only the Amazon effect that is widely known, the Amazon distortion. Yeah, thank you for saying that, Kaiser. It's totally right. We can talk a little bit more about that. I'm really excited to dig into your comment. Yes, so their plan with this Housing Equity Fund, Amazon plans to preserve or create 20,000 housing units in the 3 cities where they're adding 5,000 plus employees. So that is Seattle, King County, Nashville, and then like DC, DC, Arlington, Alexandria. And they say that the housing will be affordable to people earning 30 to 80% of the area median income. So under federal standards, that's considered like low income. Most of the people in DC who earn 30 to 80% of the area median income, they are, service workers, folks working in the like hospitality industries. They are freelancers. They are like childcare workers. These are folks that don't have, some of them are like secretaries, janitorial staff, like that kind of thing. So the housing is supposed to be affordable to all of these folks. What we have seen is that the commitments that they've made, the housing commitments that they've made, are actually affordable to 80% of the area median income. And that's sort of like early career, like policy communications, project managers, those kinds of jobs that are more like white collar, professional, like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday sort of thing. Again, they said that this money will go to minority-led developers and organizations and public sector agencies, which, drives me nuts, because public sector agencies means that in some ways, those public sector agencies benefit from like federal subsidies. In some essences, they are funded by like federal grants, local grants, taxpayer funds. So what's happening is that some of this money from the Housing Equity Fund is like a reverse tax. That means that taxpayers then will end up paying for the service of those loans provided by Amazon. Yeah, it's pretty gross. And I will say that Amazon is not the only one to be doing this. There are other tech housing funds that exist. So Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, they all have, some form of this model. They're really, so for example, Microsoft has said in its materials that they intend for investors to make a modest profit off of their housing fund. Google, in essence, has the same sort of thing. Its fund is actually mostly land that they have intended to go to it's public land, or no, I'm sorry, it's Google-owned land, and public agencies, public sector agencies can then build like affordable housing that has like a 99-year ground lease. But in essence, Google remains the landlord for this land and housing. And Facebook also, like their investment in housing is mostly intended to pay 80 to 120% of the area median income. So that means it's not really for low income households or households that make low incomes. It is intended for their like early career workforce, early to mid career workforce who make, somewhere between $100,000 and $120,000 over in Silicon Valley and in Austin, actually, which is where I live. Yes, how much will actually be under 50% of the area median income, and how many will be family units? Yeah, great question. Very little that will be under 50% of the area median income, household income for the median or middle household in the region. Yeah, that's right. And I will say area median income is adjusted for family size. So the bigger the family, the higher the adjustment. It really seems that almost everything funded from the Housing Equity Fund is around that 60% to 80%. And so far, nothing is really under 50% so far. Yeah, and I just wanted to recap and say, this is Amazon's MO. Modus operandi. They go where they can get subsidies and incentives. So keep in mind that they've received from local and state governments $4.2 billion in incentives nationally since 2000. That's like a shit ton. That's so much money. Yeah, it's wild. And so they've avoided paying taxes for years. Like they haven't paid many taxes at all. When they finally did pay taxes, it was an effective tax rate in 2020 of 4% as opposed to 21%. So they have pledged for this, housing equity funds, they've pledged $2 billion. And they've avoided, like just in 2020, they've avoided paying $2.3 billion in taxes. So again, like this is really problematic that they're essentially a reverse tax, like taxpayers are paying for them and getting very little in return. As we saw earlier, Amazon drives up real estate costs in the region, and not only because speculators step in and they start listing their homes and properties, they start like sitting on land and waiting for that prime, Amazon time to when Amazon is going to come in and hire all these workers and there's going to be this housing crunch. Speculators do that, yes, but so does Amazon. Amazon comes in, and as we saw in Seattle in the South Lake Union area, they just bought up swaths of land there. They flex political muscle to make sure that the terms that govern kind of development and housing, that they are favorable to Amazon. So we saw that with the head tax. We're seeing that in Northern Virginia as we think about how these funds or the projects for the housing that's being proposed. Amazon is, leading in the chambers of commerce in various cities. Amazon is taking people to lunch, like wining and dining folks, and ensuring that they have the biggest voice in what happens in the cities, and that all of the policies are favorable. So I will give you an example. Like they say, we're building affordable housing in Seattle and King County. And it's not like Amazon's super generous and humanitarian and magnanimous in their, in their commitments. It is that is the law. And you can probably bet that some of what they're doing is lobbying to change laws. So it's just horrible. And lastly, they offer minimal community benefits. So they created this housing equity fund, which they say that they make little to no profit from, which is not true, because otherwise they would give grants. They would give grants and they would write it off as part of their charity. But instead, they're making it a loan. And it's very unclear whether the profit made from these loans is recycled so that it continues to, that little profit. I think in the life of the loans, they stand to gain something like $895 million in a like 20 or 30 year loan from all of this money, $895 million. It is unclear whether that is going to be recycled to create additional affordable housing. Instead, from what I can tell and from what's out there so far, they're keeping that profit, and they're saying that's not a lot of profit, but it is absolutely 100% true that if you paid $895 million in Virginia, you would solve most of the housing crisis for the foreseeable, like for the next 10 to 15 years. So that's a thing. Yeah. So, all right. It's a lot of gloom and doom. It's a lot of bad stuff. But I want to talk about some of the ways that folks can think about like 3 big buckets of strategies that combat this before Amazon before Northern Virginia becomes Seattle. So something that the other the housing tech funds, which again, I'm not saying are good, they're not good, but in some ways they're a little better, because some of those Google, Facebook, Microsoft tech funds, housing tech funds, they go to funds that already exist. So for example, they might go to a housing trust fund in the city of Seattle. So the city of Seattle ultimately, like technically, has the last say in what happens with those funds and like what projects are created. In Northern Virginia, in Nashville, where this housing equity fund is happening, it is Amazon's fund. They have complete control over who gets the projects, what they look like, the terms of tenant, like the terms of tenants' leases, like all of things like that. These funds should be under people's control, so that there's, people can shape the housing that exists and the housing that will continue to be built. In addition, like the housing that is under people's control, that is maybe like funded by a housing trust fund, that method of funding puts housing and land in community control. And in essence, that can be affordable forever. There isn't terms of affordability like in Amazon and Google, and those are like 20 to 30 year affordable housing terms. So as much as possible, funds should be under people's control. So that's like an intervention that people can ask for and demand. Public pressure, make them look bad. Like we're gonna spend all this time talking about how bad Amazon looks, but like I think people care. Like I mean, I hope, maybe that's optimistic, but I hope people care that Amazon has gotten, $4+ billion in tax subsidies, is essentially paying less taxes than anybody on earth I know. I mean, aside from like, wealthy billionaires who like figure out a way to go around the tax system, but like that Amazon is paying fewer taxes than any of us, and we should be resentful of that, and we should make them look really bad. They are not doing enough for all of the things that they have been given. And lastly, this in the same way that that Congress attaches riders to bills, I think the public can attach riders to some of the things that Amazon is doing. So Amazon is governing, essentially governing like housing conditions wherever they go. They're essentially a landlord and a real estate, massive real estate firm. They, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of things, but in their development of projects and housing, like okay, maybe we don't get control of it. Maybe we don't, have a say in it. Maybe we ask city officials to attach riders. So things like eviction protections, like tenants' rights to organizing, inclusive zoning, right to counsel, really deep levels of affordability that don't exist within statute or within laws, but maybe Amazon's, playing in the housing space, maybe they're willing to create some sort of like experiments, programs, et cetera, that would bolster tenant protections and would create things that would alleviate some of the stress. Yeah, and let's see. I think that's all. I have for you. Yeah, some of my sources. A lot of this research was done, or some of the housing equity fund research was done through Power Switch Action, and with special thanks to Cynthia Guerra. So I'm going to stop sharing and we can like talk to each other for a minute if you'd like. But I wanted to leave time for some questions.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was a really, really excellent presentation. And I really appreciate how you provide, the Seattle case study, of course, and you kind of provide a broader picture. And then looking into the different places that the Housing Equity Fund is going into, and going into the DMV as well. And before we get into questions, I wanted to invite Luz to speak about some of the really specific housing issues happening in Northern Virginia in particular. So let me go ahead and read Luz's bio, and then after Luz shares with us what's going on in Arlington, we'll take some questions. So Luz del Carmen Salama Tobar is a Salvadorian photographer. Born in Sonsonate, El Salvador, she is of Nahuatl Pipil indigenous roots and was raised in Falls Church, Virginia, after immigrating to the US. Her work centers around the violence of capitalism, exploring topics of immigration, displacement, and everyday life, highlighting the importance of cultural representation and giving a platform to marginalized voices. Tobar's work additionally explores pain, loss, and love through the use of a surrealistic style. She is also an organizer and co-founder of a Virginia-based collective called La Colectiva, led by Latinx individuals. She received her BFA in photography at the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, Maryland in 2018, and was awarded a Fulbright Fellowship in 2019. She was a visiting scholar at the University Don Bosco in San Salvador, El Salvador, where she did her Fulbright research. So Luz, are you there?
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. Luz here. I'll be talking about the current situation in Columbia Garden apartments. Columbia Gardens apartments are in Arlington, Virginia, right off of Columbia Pike, the intersection of Greenbrier Street and I believe 8th Road. Currently, there is about 60 units in the Columbia Garden apartments. It was bought 4 years ago by Ryan Benston, and he basically gave them a 45-day notice of vacancy. So they now have 17 days to vacant, and there is currently at least 33 families that haven't yet found housing. What we're currently doing, we're trying to just keep the pressure going, and every Friday we do a carorazo in front of the apartments where we invite media and try to build press, and a couple of tenants talk each time. We also have a petition that I can share. Just quick 1 second. We currently have a petition as well, which, since the buildings are going to be they're going to construct townhouses. it was bought by I believe it's called Byte Right Development, which means that they can construct anything they want to. They don't have to have the approve of Arlington County board members. Um, so that's just making it very difficult. And the issue, how Christina was saying that it's already affecting Amazon is already affecting our community, and they're basically sending them to Barcroft, which we know Barcroft was bought by Jair Lynn Real Estate, which Amazon loaned them, I believe, $160 million. And the county also gave them a loan of $150 million under interest. So it's supposed to be the last affordable place in Arlington. But what we discovered is it's not affordable, because one of the requirements, it's 49K, and most of the families cannot afford 49K. And if they don't afford, if they can't afford it, they have to go through a company called the guarantors, which the guarantors charge a fee of 100 to like 1,800. 800. So that doesn't make any sense. So the families are very like emotionally drained, going through all kinds of stress, but as we keep telling them, unity is power. And so far what we have accomplished is that the county is going to use their emergency funds to help the community there. But also, we know that Arlington County does not protect their information because the majority are undocumented. So we did a FOIA request a couple of, I think about a month ago, and Arlington County does not have any policies. And even though this money is local money, not federal money, we still want to make sure our communities are safe. So we have that policy called CAPA, which is Community of Arlington Protected from Abuse of ICE, which will prohibit voluntary collaboration from Arlington County with ICE. Yes, I just try to, because everything is like connected. So I just try to make a big, I believe that's briefly what we're doing right now. And we're trying to find housing for this 33 families that still don't have housing. But also, like, this is only the beginning, because there's so many families, migrant families, and just color families that are some have already been pushed out, and some have agreed to pay like a high rent that we know it's not sustainable. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done, but for right now, I think we have made process. It's just keeping the pressure going, and if anybody is interested in supporting us, all the help is welcome. We have seek legal advice, and hopefully the attorney can support us, because these communities have been living in like hazardous conditions for years, with mold, with the rats, with holes. So it's something that we're trying to see if we have leverage to pressure the owner to give more time, or also like pay for for those conditions that these communities have lived for years. Yes.
Thank you so much, Luz. Thank you for sharing what's going on in the DMV, and we'll definitely look out for the link to the petition so we can amplify that and support that, and hopefully folks on the call, on the Zoom and listening can also do as well. But thank you so much for sharing that. And we only have like a minute or two. So if there are any questions, please drop them in the chat or use the raise hand function. But one question I have, I think Christina, you mentioned like this is this topic, these conversations are very doom and gloom, unfortunately. That's just the nature of Amazon in our communities. And I was wondering if there are any success stories or anything hopeful that you've seen related to housing in the course of your work. And I mean, clearly what's happening with Luce's organizing in Northern Virginia, there is community action, there is community unity and power, and just wanting to uplift more of those stories as well. So if you have anything you can share on that, that'd be wonderful.
Totally. One big success story that I think we don't talk about enough is with the announcement of HQ2, folks in New York just had this massive infrastructure and power and were able to run Amazon out of town within a few weeks. Within a few weeks of the announcement, people showed unity, people showed their disdain for this company's influence, and they said no. And Amazon ran away scared. And to be frank, Amazon didn't do their work. They didn't realize how much disdain there actually was. So I would say that HQ2 fight in New York was a huge win. The other thing I would say is that despite something that's interesting that I enjoy is that Amazon's workers, while questionable because of their connection to this, to this company, Amazon's workers skew progressive. And when they go and they work for Amazon, they go to a city and live in that city, they bring their politics. Like sociologists have studied how Amazon's workforce is very progressive and theoretically wants to do the right thing. They want to do well by doing good, but that's, whatever, that's another story. But Seattle has gotten increasingly more progressive and has passed increasingly more progressive city ordinances and requirements. And they have been able to tax Amazon, and they have been able to get money so that they could, serve affordable housing and the need that is so massive there. And I think, but they're kind of too late. Honestly, they're a little bit too late for what is happening, but it's not too late in Northern Virginia. I know that sounds like you're like, no, but I think that it's true. It's like not what it is in Seattle. So yeah, so I think just so you know, like, I know that the politics in Northern Virginia, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's not exactly progressive. It's not like Seattle at this point. So with kind of a flip in culture, like hopefully Northern Virginia's culture and stuff isn't necessarily like swallowed up, at least the good parts, but you can count on things skewing a little bit more progressive just among like the populace, not necessarily among politicians. So that's something to keep in mind and start getting people that narrative and like reeling them in when you start, when new people start coming in. So that's what I would say.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christina, for your insight and for your experience, your knowledge, and for sharing that with us. And I feel a little better knowing some things that have been really successful in implementing, and also having some tools at our disposal, additional tools at our disposal to fight back and push back against Amazon, especially in housing. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you all, and thanks for all of the work you do. And Luce, I'm with you. I'm supporting you.
Yeah, thank you for your support.